Welcome back to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm JP. We've got a great guest for you here today. You're probably seeing him now because he had made a little sound. Jesse Lee Yarbrough, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. I'm the third Pinedo brother, fourth Pinedo brother that nobody knows about.
Yes, the other Pinedo brother, Peter, is still away at military training camp, not able to join us. But Jesse, thank you for chatting with us. Musician extraordinaire, drummer, composer, entrepreneur, and also a full-time marketer. So a man of many talents, many hats. Currently, we have he's doing a lot of exciting stuff in the marketing, especially indie marketing field. So maybe we'll link that in the description and on your website or something like that. But it's a perfect thing to have you talk about, because we're talking about capitalism. We're talking about and maybe the fall of it. Through the lens, of course, this is an artist podcast. Brothers is an artist podcast, especially for Catholics. So we're talking about it through the lens of Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. One of my favorite books that was introduced to me by Mr. Jesse Lee.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh. Oh, okay. Cool. Well, you're welcome. Then.
It was hearing you rant about it for so many hours that I was like, let me actually check out what he's talking about in person.
Yeah. When did you read it? When did you actually get through it?
Well,
or it's a big book. I don't know.
Yeah, I read it actually while I was living and working in Hollywood, and it was a perfect time to read Les Mis, because you think about what Hugo was picturing, the squalor, the incredible just misery that he's able to depict so vividly, so just in your face. You felt how, like, when you're talking about Cosette, you feel how terrible like it was for her. She's selling her teeth, for crying out loud. And I was working literally surrounded by a tenement camp, working in Hollywood. It would have been probably like 2016, 2017. And it's probably worse now. I haven't been there for a few months, obviously, but at that time we were surrounded by homeless people, like, living around us, and they were all borderline dangerous, like high on drugs, and prostitution was rampant. It was just it was like living in Les Mis.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, for the audience members who haven't read it yet, it's just one of the best. I mean, Victor Hugo, he's a master of words. It's long. You got to be prepared for a journey. But yeah, he's sort of a master of kind of like just giving you a really full. A lot of people kind of get bothered by how lengthy his stuff is, but for me, I do a pretty bad job of kind of creating my own world in my head. I have less of that imaginative, I have a harder time visualizing things unless somebody gives me like a succinct view of what I'm looking at, and then I can do it, which is why I also like Tolkien, which, I'm pretty sure everyone on here probably knows you're a big Tolkien fan. So yeah, that's something that I've never been bothered by it. I like the wordy material. So
well, there's something to be said about, and you can say this about the Russian authors as well. The more work you put in to actually to read it, to get through the story, it seems like the more you get out of it in the end. I would probably be Matt Walsh. I love listening to Matt Walsh, and I'll probably be no longer eligible to be a man, because he has very strict rules for when a man can cry. When I got to the end of Les Mis, I was definitely crying. Like, that book was just.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of. My mom said that too. Yeah.
Shots fired.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying, my mom is one of the most well-read people I know. She's got a library at home of just thousands of books. She loves to read. She's always loved to read. she's never been a TV watcher. So you think of all the hours and hours and hours everyone else has spent watching TV, she's normally spent reading books or doing other things. So, and she said there was never ever a book like that actually made her cry. And she said when she got to that end of that, she was sobbing. So I'm like, that's a pretty big deal for my mom to say. So
yeah.
Not meant to be a shot fired. Yeah.
Jessie Lee's mom is a very tender-hearted woman. I definitely think that I could see her taking that, because at the end, and we'll get to this later, but he's painting a picture of mercy, but not just external mercy, but inward. You know, it's a self-forgiveness, which is something that's so key to today. It's insane. So anyway, I want to get back a little bit to what we were talking about living in Los Angeles, because I think that's a bit of a key of what we're seeing, because the larger cities, and our audience is primarily not Los Angeles. You know, we're talking more to people living in Texas and the Midwest, and a lot of people in Canada as well. So it might not be something that is so front of mind, but if you live in New York or you live in Los Angeles, the squalor of the conditions, like it's out of a movie, really. Like, it's hard to believe how bad the living conditions are, what the poor
really
live like in LA. And you know, we could pull up pictures, but that doesn't really do it justice. And that's kind of more just, you still don't get a real picture of it. What can you describe what you saw living in Los Angeles? We both moved around the same time. What's your experience of the squalor of LA?
Well, it was, I mean, it's bad. And it's because of, you know, I know we're gonna talk about the AOC in a little bit, but the middle class is disappearing, because the government has they have a sort of a racket going where, you know, and you can just look, like, if you live there, just take a look at the stuff you're voting for. You know, on the ballots there, every year they'll add more and more, or every time like a voting season comes around, they'll add more and more government spending for things, and they'll tell you this is going to increase taxes. And so what ends up happening is, you know, that like takes a toll on everyone who can not afford it. The people who can afford it will either pay it, or if they're pissed off enough, they'll just leave. But then that means like the people who are kind of like in the middle, they get taxed so much to where it's like they're forced to either leave, which is what I did, or they are forced to, and I don't mean directly taxed on your income. I mean, just the whole system is rigged to where now the cost of living of things is going up. So even if you're not being taxed more, you're still being taxed more, right? Because you know, inflation is just sort of it's like sort of a hidden tax, you know, where it's like, yeah, you might not be your tax rate on your W-2s, you know, employment forms aren't, you know, you have a cat that is like right behind you. Sorry, I got distracted. He pushed his way in. Sorry, I get really easily distracted. Yeah, so basically, when, you know, if the price of gas rises, you're not necessarily being taxed more, but you are, you know. That's and the way that. Go ahead. I was just going to say, the people in the middle who can't handle that long term eventually either become homeless or leave. So now, like, all of the middle class is sort of disappearing to where the homelessness has just become rampant. Just in, you know, where I used to live in North Hollywood and Sherman Oaks, it was like a decent area when I first got there, which was only 5 years ago. And about 2.5 years ago, it got really bad. So even just in a short 5-year span, you could see this downgrade to where my car had gotten broken in twice last year, like the last year I lived there. When we showed up originally 5 years ago, it was a pretty safe neighborhood. And I know other people who've gotten all that, you know, their stuff vandalized, you know, in places that were pretty, you know, pretty like safe earlier on.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know Arthur, our buddy Arthur.
Mhm.
He had some stuff happen to one of his cars. So
And he drives nice cars.
yeah, exactly.
But I wanted to say also on the point that you were making about how they raise taxes. It's so insidious what they do. I mean, unless you're really like a very hard-headed individual, which I am. So the way they put it on the ballot, though, you go in to vote, and you're going through all your politicians, and then they say, "Would you like to raise your taxes by 0.0025%?" So that you can keep axe murderers off the street. So vote no if you want if you're pro axe murderer.
Yeah. The way they put it, they're like,
yeah,
well, if you vote against it, you're obviously a bad person.
like in the ballot, they're like they're hearing
gosh.
you to keep on raising your taxes, guy. This is what you need. Just keep raising your taxes. And I'm the one that's in the ballot box, just like cussing up a storm. Like they want more of my money. Are you serious?
Well, and the thing is, like, if it were actually doing something good, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, which I still wouldn't like because I'm a small government type of guy. But if there are actually people in charge that weren't using it, but you look at the homelessness problem, it never gets fixed because the people in those positions, they get way too good paychecks to like.
Mm-hmm. And I'll paint a picture of what it was by the time I left. We worked off of a major Hollywood avenue, and then there was the Hollywood freeway that ran right next to it, and so there was a big underpass, where the major Hollywood avenue ran under the freeway, and it was just a big homeless camp underneath, like just packed tents and people. It was like its own little infrastructure, and our coworkers would oftentimes have to deal with the people that were, and when I say have to deal, there would be someone that just came to our office door and was just like hammering on it, like just hammering and screaming obscenities, and he just wouldn't leave. And you call the cops and they won't come. You call the cops and they say, "Is someone bleeding on the street?" No. Okay, then we're not coming. And because
thank you to the defund the police movement.
Right, exactly. And then it got so bad that there was one time when we had to send out one of our staff to like say, "Sir, I'm sorry, but you can't keep just hammering on our door. We can't help you any." And he wasn't even wanting anything. Like these people they all have some sort of mental issue that it's not something you just say, "How can I help you? Do you need a bottle of water or something?" It's they're not in the same universe.
Yeah.
And so he goes out to shoo him away. The guy would pull out a knife. It was very often that they are violent. And he tried to stab the coworker in this one particular incident. And the coworker jumps back, he like dives away and he trips, and there's like a gash cut on his side, so it's not serious, but he is bleeding. And the homeless guy runs off. And I am on the other side of campus, so I don't see this happen, but I see the aftermath. I'm trying to help this coworker who's bleeding. We're trying to make sure, me and my supervisor are working together to try to make sure everyone else is safe. And then later that night, I was working a really long day. I saw like they had taken pictures, because with our security cameras, we took pictures of the guy who did the stabbing. And I spotted him, like I'm working late. It's like 10 o'clock at night in Hollywood. And I'm like, there's the guy. He's right there. He's like right by our gates again. And there's a lot of people around, kids and whatever. And so I'm like, okay, call a couple of our security guards to say, keep an eye on this guy. And I call the cops, and we wait for a while. Like I keep on calling, like I can be persistent, because they don't come if you just call once. I kept on calling and calling and calling. And finally they were able to come out, and I say, look, it's that guy over there. And by this time the guy had thankfully wandered away from our campus and had just gone up to I'll be back under the bridge. But I'm keeping my eyes on him. Like, he's right there. He's under the bridge, officer. He just stabbed one of he scratched, but he tried to stab one of our staff. And the officer says, "Oh, yeah, he's under the bridge. we're not going to do anything.
Oh my gosh.
We can't do anything. And I'm like, what? Like, we have it on camera. Like, he's violent. He's can hurt someone. And they're like, no, we're not going over there.
Wow.
They just can't, they cannot manage what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's something that's not getting better.
No.
I can't imagine that in the few months since we left, that Hollywood has become a nice, safe place to live. And, you know, it's sad because we have a sort of undercurrent of an American nobility that's springing up that is masquerading as champions for the poor. It's the same thing you would see in Les Mis, I think, which is the idea of, well, here, let me show you. How about I share my screen real quick?
Yeah. Oh,
The Met Gala just passed. And for those lucky enough to not know what the Met Gala is, here are some images from.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy.
Yeah, like it's basically an excuse for people to just, that are obscenely rich, to just dress like it. And then tell everyone how useful they are. But this is the nobility. This is our.
Everyone how useful they are. That's funny. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
This is our nobility, though. Like, this is the people that I don't think that they realize it, but they're the ones that, if the poor was really going to have had it, they're the ones that would get the first ones to be on the chopping block.
Yeah.
You don't live like this and then have the poor not be upset at you.
Yeah.
If the poor were ready to rise up, it's not it's not the middle class that would get it. Now, there is a chance that these are the people that will lead a poor mob, and then they'll come after the middle class big time. But that's not what you saw in the French Revolution. Maybe that's actually what you saw more in the Russian Revolution. But we're talking here about Les Mis, and in Les Mis, these were the guys that they were going after. You know the names better than I do. I just blanked on the names, but the whole revolutionary cadre at the end, it was not the middle class they were going after, at least in the story. What did you make of the revolution there at the end, Jess, in Les Mis?
You talking about with the boys?
Yeah.
I dislike when people talk broadly about ideology. You know, you think like, you know, we need to stop whatever it is, you know, racism or you know, classism or sexism. You know, we need to stop this, and they kind of have this angry mob mentality, but they don't find like specific like if you give me a specific example of like, well, this person did this thing to this person, and it was obviously like a sexual assault or a sexism or whatever. It's like, okay, let's go after that individual thing. That's so I do not like the broad sweeping, because that's how most people argue, is like they disagree with you ideologically, and so they'll kind of throw like broad things at you, and it's really hard to like engage in a conversation because like all you're doing is throwing broad accusations. If I say, James, you're racist, right? That's something that like,
that's a death sentence these days.
Yeah, and it's hard for you to argue with, because now you have to go through it's like such a broad thing. You're like, why do I have to go through my whole life now to prove to you that I'm not racist? Like, you tell me one thing that you did that you saw, and you know, then I'll believe you. But yeah, so what I really liked that Victor Hugo was doing in those scenes is like, you had all those boys kind of defending their keep and whatnot, and some of them had like their speeches. Enjolras, you know, had a speech about when he basically he played executioner for that guy who killed an innocent bystander. Enjolras, you know, Enjolras, I have a really hard time with these French names, especially when I haven't had that much coffee. He had he had what he wanted to do, and anybody who used it as an excuse to like hurt or kill innocent people, he was like not okay with it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just this angry mob mentality. I mean, it was kind of an angry mob, but it wasn't in the same way that you see stuff now, like with the riots that happened kind of like right when COVID started. It's like people were just destroying stuff.
Yeah.
Like there was no like real good reason other than let's just go destroy stuff.
Yeah.
We're angry at something, and so we're gonna go throw rocks and break windows and everything. And
turn over cars and yeah.
It's like give us something specific to work on, man.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's what I really liked about Jean Valjean's character in that scene, is that through the eyes of Hugo, Charity sort of is like he has this one character who's actually doing concrete things to help people throughout this entire thing.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, vague generalities, Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. I love that point where we're pointing at a problem and we're saying, this is how we can fix this problem. Let's do that. I think that's something that Peterson would say. Jordan Peterson would say something very similar to that. Like, let's not be worrying about fixing global poverty or like growing back all the rainforest until we have clean drinking water in this province. There's a province in Canada where there's dirty drinking water and they cannot get it clean for whatever reason. And it's of course it's the poor Native Americans that are the ones that live in that province. And instead of worrying about let's clean the drinking water, the nation states are going around saying let's grow back the rainforest. So it's like, okay, let's have a priority, like clean up your room first. And you can actually see that a little bit. Compare the young ones at the beginning of the book to the young ones at the end of the book who are starting this revolution, and they had a very focused ideal. They were idealistic, and Jean Valjean had to point out to them many times that, look, hey, your ideals are not worth destroying so many lives. We're not going to be doing that. He had the at this point acquired wisdom, hard-earned wisdom that he used to temper the ideal of the youth at that time who were going on this revolt. And if those that haven't read the book, Jean Valjean was never on board with the revolt at any point in time. Like, in fact, it's a very interesting point that Hugo made Jean Valjean become rich. He was not anti-rich in any way, even though he was very, very supportive of a revolution. Leading, the events leading to the French Revolution were he looked at it with great reverence, but he was not against money. And that's a point that people often forget, is that if you're against money, for example, AOC went to the Met Gala with a dress that had stitched to the backside of it, which I want to point out that she was very happy to have people look at her backside. Okay. I'm not sure if that's decorum fitting of a high elected office in the US, but still, I don't know. What do I know? Maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. But in any case, so stitched to her backside were the words "tax the rich." Now, you are play acting if you're in a room full of the rich and being employed and petted by them with stitched to your backside so that all can see "tax the rich." This is a masquerade at this point. And that type of behavior, that type of masquerading is never a marker of a true revolution. The guys in Les Mis that were standing, on the bulwarks of the war, of the revolution, they were in tatters. They lived their ideal. Now, was their ideal perfect? No. Jean Valjean, like I said, pointed that out. But they lived it. Anything else is play acting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so it's so funny that you say that. Like, there's like a few types of rich people I have found. There's a lot of the ones in Hollywood are just really like they're into themselves. But the ones that and then there's like super rich that they can afford to have that ideology because no matter how much people tax them, they're not going to be affected by it, like guys like Bill Gates and stuff like that. And then there's like this other entrepreneur, like people don't know, like a lot of really well-off people who are like business owners, and like in the book, The thing that I liked about the book is it showed that he seemed to understand economy in a way that when it showed Jean Valjean work so hard that he got really rich, it showed that he was putting other people to work. This is the thing I don't really think people like AOC and some other people understand. If you get paid as like an elected official, like your salary is built into that out of people's tax dollars. But if you want to make it as an actual business, you have to provide something that is valuable to other people. And this is what people don't understand. It's like economy is not a matter of like how many dollars you have. Economy is a matter of like what goods and services you provide. That's how it all starts. The only reason we came up with money is to find a way to be able to transact things in a way that could move across different, industries that were not just like, the guy who fishes and the guy who, has hats, like they could trade if the guy who wanted a hat also fished and that the other guy wanted the exact opposite thing. But it's like, what if the guy who was fishing wanted something else that wasn't a hat? Well, it's like now if you have one medium of exchange that sort of goes across all industries, that's very helpful. But the money itself is not what's valuable. It's the actual goods and services. And so if you want to actually be the rich business owners that I know are people who have worked their butts off. And I've worked under a few millionaires, and they are some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And they started from the lowest points in life. And it flies in the face of all this, like, well, they only got that way because society like basically makes it easier for them to be rich because they're white. Well, no, they weren't. Most of them were not white, actually. And the other thing is a lot of them made it to that point without anybody ever seeing their face. So it didn't matter what color they were, so it's just the irony of like I can't get over this, like this, all this tax to rich stuff. It's like, if you want to have less money to go around, right? And like you talked about this, I'm working for Klaviyo at this point, but I was, I've been, kind of an independent guy for a long, long time and trying to do my own businesses and things like that. And it's incredibly hard. And it's sort of a slap in the face when people say like, well, we need to, tax business owners and stuff like that, raise corporate taxes. And it's like, it makes me feel like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm trying to I've got so many friends, especially in LA, that complain about like these ideological things, and they're never willing to actually go out and fix something. They just want something to vote on a ballot. It's like, dude, find a problem, work your ass off, and like try to fix it. We've talked about this for a long time. I have a passion for music, and I want to see musicians do well. So I'm constantly trying to help them, like, actually come up with ways where they don't have to get a record deal, but they can still finance their own records and their own tours and things like that, and actually manage an ROI. But none of them, they're all like, not all of them. Once you kind of like talk to them for a while, they're like actually kind of get on board, but they're sort of unwilling to look at the numbers. And I think that's the sad reality of people who are kind of claiming some of these ideologies of just like tax the rich. It's like, if you actually sat down and looked at the numbers, like you would see why it's not like why, rich people end up just leaving, and so like, and that's what's happening. If you actually look at the rate of people expatriating from the US, it used to be in like the hundreds or maybe low, thousands every year. And over the past decade or so, it's gotten more and more and more and more as we've raised, as more of this tax the rich ideology is starting to come around. The actual business owners that are like, oh man, like especially internet owned businesses and things like that, where it's like sort of location independent. You could see the expatriation numbers going up to now it's in the tens of thousands every year. And it's because, like Biden wants to raise corporate taxes. People are like, dude, if I want my business to actually thrive, if I'm going to be able to help people, like, if I'm trying to help people, let's say I'm in the financial planning business, right? Just as an example, or whatever, pick a business. If it's something to actually help people, like if I have a good, like for finance, I'm like, I want to show people how to save, manage a budget, and retire. If I want that business to grow, it costs a certain amount of money to actually acquire customers. And if you chop it in half by taxing corporate entities 50%, you're going to be growing by 50% less every year, because you're not going to be able to reinvest all those dollars, right?
Yeah.
So it's people like the thing that kind of like really annoys me about this thing is that they don't look at the hard numbers.
Yeah.
And they're just content with throwing ideological, like, and I actually called it, like, there was a person I was arguing with about how healthcare affects businesses, and I don't even have a strong point of view on how I think that should be implemented, but well, maybe I do. But what she was saying is that, like, yeah, businesses need to do this. I'm like, it's a case by case scenario. Like for me, I told her, I was like, you want to see my budget sheet of like how much it costs to acquire a customer, and then if this business is just me, or if I have an employee or two employees. And she didn't take a look at the numbers, but I'm like, I'll gladly show them to you. Basically, every employee that I had, I went from being into profit, and every extra employee that I would have had went from slowly being profit to, by the time I had two, I think like by the time I would have to like hire 2 employees, I'd be in like thousands of dollars of debt per month.
Yeah.
Because of how all the healthcare stuff affects businesses, and she's just not willing to look at the numbers. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I keep on shouting your ideology, like keep on treating business owners like that. They're just going to leave. And that's what we see happening.
Yeah. What we're seeing here, I like to call it a modern American revolution. There was the Revolutionary War, and now we have a modern American revolution where the two sides of this debate are getting further and further apart. Like at this point, dialogue is starting to break down.
Yeah.
And now we have this increasingly polarized society where I think both sides now are thinking, let's just get a divorce. Like the thing that I point to, though, is that has never happened without bloodshed. There's never been countries that split willingly and mutually, amicably.
Goodbye, my lover. Goodbye, my friend.
He's got like tears in his eyes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yep. So I'm curious, what do you think now of a American revolution, American split happening? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. There's a part of me that thinks, well, that's just way far down the line. And then there's this other part of me that's like, no, it's not. Like, I don't know. It just seems like, like people are getting, both sides are getting very fed up with each other. And this is even something you saw with, like, people are kind of backtracking. Like, there are people who were going after Norm a few years ago because he was very politically incorrect. And he never pandered. Unlike some of the other,
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. Or AOC, like, to the detriment of his career in many cases. Like, he was fired from SNL because they're like, well, lay off the OJ jokes. And he sort of laid into him because he's like, well, he just wanted to. It wasn't about ideology for him. It was about what he thought was truly funny.
Right. Right.
And
we're run by ideologues now.
Yeah. So I you'd say like he could speak to both sides, and I think at one point that might have been true. But if you looked a little bit, a year or two ago, I don't think that I think now people are looking back and like, oh, this guy passed away, and it's really sad. We're going to remember him. But if before we all knew he was very sick, it was very polarized with some of the comments he made. There's some people in the public sphere, the Twitter mob that went after him for being so politically incorrect, and it's like, I don't know. Anyway, so about a split, I'm not sure. It's scary to think about, but whenever I think about it, I'm like, man, I'm glad I live in Texas.
So do I.
I just don't know. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen if there's going to be a willing split, or if or if people are going to wise up. Yeah, like people in California, it's, you know, places like that, like if they're going to actually see that, like the policy you keep on voting for, it's going to keep on pushing stuff this way. So maybe you should stop voting that way. Like if the state collapses, will that be like something that is that going to be a big enough wake up call for them, or is it not? And I hate saying for them. I don't like, you know, just generalizing this picture of the opposition, because I think that's one of the things that it's a problem, is like when you're like, oh, all conservatives are this, or all liberals are this, and it's not about all these, you know, like I was saying, there are people in like in the rich world, for example, that are total idiots, and then there's other ones that are the hardest working people I've ever seen. So it's I don't want to like, you know, I think it makes it worse when you know, it's just like you sort of kind of paint with a broad stroke.
Well, that's what we're talking about with ideologues. They that sort of mentality is what leads you to make those kind of mistakes that we see where Los Angeles is just destroying itself right now. And
sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's that sort of, okay, AOC went to the gala with, like I said, the Met Gala with the tax the rich plastered to her backside, and there was a video clip that came out of it, and she was just gushing. She was just so ecstatic. It made me think of what I've seen in the past of a young actress that is just feels like she's made it. You know, she's accepted amongst the rich, and the echelon that she's wanting to crack into is now accepting her. And she's stammering, she's blushed, she's just so happy. And you know, there's nothing wrong with being that happy, but it reveals that you're the puppet, you know, you're the one that's begging to get into this upper echelon of society. And it shows that all that which you talk about on your Instagram or things like that, or your socials, it's just a ploy to get to that point, to get to that society. And then once you're accepted there, that's your goal, is to be in this, to be amongst the rich and the famous and have them love you. And that sort of mentality where you just say anything, you know, say anything to get to where you want to be. It doesn't matter at that point if you're using reason, if you're using logic, if you're backing up ideas with numbers, using data, all that which you need to do to actually solve problems, because this world is incredibly complex. And if you don't use those tools, the best, you know, we have meager tools at our disposal, period. You know, our hands are only capable of doing so much. And if you don't use reason and logic or numbers and data to get to where to solve anything, you're going to make a bigger mess than what you found. And so ideologues are just making bigger messes on both sides. And it's an increasing, what we can learn from reading Les Mis is that does not work. Hugo lived amongst the revolution. He lived amongst the nobility. He wrote his experiences with chilling detail. It doesn't work. That's the one thing that we can take from that is like Peterson already wrote it so well, you know, abandon ideology. It's not going to get you anywhere beyond creating some sort of dystopian, terrible future, which maybe we're headed to. Like the French Revolution was not successful. It created a reign of terror. The Bolshevik Revolution was not successful. It made an even bigger reign of terror. Like how many millions of peasants have died since then? And now if you speak out and people maybe say the Maoist revolution was successful, that you still disappear in China. Like if you have some sort of thought.
I saw it happen. I saw it happen when I was there. Yeah, it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced.
What did you see exactly?
We were there with a group of our friends they're all sort of covert. Well, it's kind of an interesting situation. But it doesn't matter. We were there with a group of Christians that were there, that we were there with a band performing. And there were a few people, Chinese natives, that were friends of the people who organized this, who were not native Chinese. And then there was, there was a few friends involved that were natives. And then there were also government officials that were kind of like holding our hand and walking us around. And they were sort of questioning if we were religious or not. You know, they didn't want, because they're obviously anti-religious. So we're trying to play it cool and everything. And then we don't know what happened if the government found out that the natives that we, some of our friends that were hanging out with us were Christian or not. But what ended up happening was we basically asked, like, whoever the leader was like, hey, this is one of our friends locally, and can we have them come with us on different outings that were going on that were government sponsored. And then at a certain point, we all got on this one bus. I remember we got on this bus. This girl was such an amazing girl. Great, very, very exciting to talk to her about her faith.
She was a Chinese citizen?
Yeah, but also covert Christian.
Got it.
And I still don't know exactly what happened, but what I think happened is, like, the government found that out. And they knew she was talking to Americans. She was hanging out with us the entire time. And so we just saw, we got on the bus and she got on with us. And then we saw these Chinese officials pull up, get out of a government vehicle. Armed guards got out. One of them got on the bus with a gun, pointed to the girl, said something in Mandarin, and got her off. And then we just never saw her again. And I to this day, I don't know what happened to her. Like, I didn't hear from the people who led the trip. After that, we were all just like,
yeah, you're just a musician on a band tour.
Yeah. So it was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And she disappeared, and I, like, to this day, I've never heard from her again. So I have no idea what happened. So yeah, people think that's like, you want to go that route? You want to go like a socialist communist route? Like, can I rant on just what we were talking about?
Please do.
Specificity. A couple of things we were talking about in terms of the numbers. When people are talking about tax the rich, I think there's a few things they don't understand. Is they want to tax the 1%. And they think it's this one group of people, but different people move in and out of the top 1% all the time. Sometimes people are in it and they're making, because you got to think of your own life. Well, there have been times in my life when I made this much, and there have been other times when I made this much. So you're in different tax brackets. So it's not just one group of people that we're talking about here. So that's the first thing I'd ask the listeners to kind of consider. I'm willing to bet there's probably not a ton of leftists that are listening to this, but if there is, like, I'm going to throw out, just put out an olive branch and say, like, just consider the fact that it's not one group of people. The second thing that you got to consider is oftentimes those, the people who are making the most money, you do have, like I said, kind of the idiots that are like, trust fund babies, or they make it into the movie world. And so they don't have to provide, like, they don't ever have to worry about an ROI or anything like that. So they can kind of stand on this entity, like the movie system, right? Whatever production company you want to talk about. If you talk to that production company, I guarantee they're going to be talking about ROI at the end of the day. This is something that's going on with Disney. It's like, they've been pissing people off with, like, a lot of the their stuff. They're kind of pushing what do you call it? So sort of social justice narrative, and it's pissing off a lot of their fans. And so now Disney's like, well, do we keep doing this? Or, we're a for-profit company at the end of the day. So we actually got to make movies that people want to see.
Mm-hmm.
People haven't been wanting to see these movies. So that's the thing, is like, you could have this actor or actress that's like touting all these, these things, or even the directors. But as soon as you get to the finance department, they're going to be like, you can't do this, you can't do this. Like, we're actually got to go and, like, actually try to make profit. So don't piss too many people off. The last thing I wanted to say is, what I was going to mention about the business owners is, oftentimes you find, because of laws here, and this is what was happening with me, laws, like I said, how health insurance affects people who want to have employees, or the cost of labor here. it's gotten so expensive where it's like you're required to do all these things if you have an employee. So the richest people here, and I know this because of all the internet marketers that I've worked with over the years, and this is something I've done too, we're forced to go and hire people outside of the US and write it off as a business expense through places like Fiverr.com and, you know, other outsourcing websites. But I've talked to people that are like, well, you know, business owners that like they should be paying people more. And it's like, dude, I would love to pay people more, but it's gotten too expensive for me to afford that. And so the irony is a lot of the millionaire, you know, entrepreneur types that are in the US that have like internet businesses, people are accusing them of not paying they're accusing them of not helping the other 99%. But here's the thing. And Jordan Peterson actually brought the statistic up. I looked up an article, and if I find it, we can link it in the description.
Great.
Now this is a statistic from a few years ago. I want to say it was 2018 or something like that, but it's before we printed a lot of money. So I don't know how that's affected things, but at the time, people talk about the top 1% in America. But if you made at this, you know, and I think it's still the same, if you made over $34,000 in a year, you're in the top 1% of the entire world.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who made $34,000 and you're complaining about how the top 1% need to help everyone else, that means you got to go and actually help people in the other countries.
Money to Africa.
But their argument then that I've heard is like, well, those people are in different countries. So it's like, what? Well, they don't matter now?
Yeah.
You're in the top 1%. Like you're touting this. Like you need to be helping those people. The irony is guys like me who aren't in the top 1%, who are making around that or maybe a little more, you know, or maybe a little less some years. You know, when I was starting out, I was making less than that. And, but I was the one going to other countries and hiring these people abroad and actually providing them jobs.
Right.
And this is something people talk about, like, oh, slave labor in these other countries. You're just like, you know, it's like, no, you don't understand. You have no idea what goes into these business negotiations. This guy actually wants to work for $5 an hour. Look, $5 an hour is like insane to him. $3. You know what the average income per month is in the Philippines?
No.
$300. Actually,
Wow.
It might be like somewhere between $300 and $400. I think it might be about $400 now. So you're talking for, you know, that's roughly, you know, between $2 and maybe $5 an hour, depending on how many hours you're working, right? So people treat that you're like you're going over and maybe, granted, maybe I don't know anything about Apple's work environments or these big companies that source the stuff overseas, but people don't understand that, like, well, you're paying those people poor wages. It's like, you don't understand what that dollar is worth in their country. That to them is like more than a full-time living.
And then, so what is the solution here? You're not paying him a proper wage, so don't pay him? Because that seems to be so much what
the thing you're pissed about.
That seems to be what the solution is in so many instances. This country or this company is not paying a fair wage, so shut it down.
Right. Yeah. That's
okay. So your solution is that nobody gets any wage. I'm sorry, but that's not a solution here. That's
right.
A bigger problem that you're presenting to many people. So
and again, if it's something that's very useful, like let's say you're helping people who have been traumatized by sexual abuse. And you have a business model that helps them with, you know, therapy or something like that, right? It's like, do you want that business to go under, honestly, or do you want it to actually keep going? Like, if you want it to keep going, like, let it breathe. You know, don't tax them as much. They're going to have more money. This is the thing, like, people don't understand. Like, if you tax a company that's making a certain amount, they're not going to be able to pay their employees as much. And this is numbers that people just don't want to look at on a balance sheet. But like, and every one of my friends who would complain about this stuff, I'm like, I'm more than happy to show you my Google Sheets where I keep all my numbers. More than happy to do it. And I'll show you exactly how it affects my balance sheet. And if you do A, B, and C, and you tax me this way, and you force me to do these things, my business is going to go under, or I have to fire all my employees and just be a one-man show, you know? And people are sort of unwilling to look at stuff like that. You know, I don't know if we could totally do a deep dive at some point, so people actually see like what goes into running a business.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Let's
way they're, you know,
schedule that.
Yeah.
That's scheduled. I think that would
I
be
don't know if
really
your
good.
audience members, it's a less on the art side. I know this is more of an art podcast. So
Well, I wanted to get into talking about new types of ways of earning money, like cryptocurrency and things like that. And so entrepreneurship would be interesting. I think artists need to have that ability to be an entrepreneur. They need to have the marketing cap. They need to be able to do all of that.
yeah.
So I think it's very useful. So let's set that up. But I know you're
Okay.
running short of time, so I wanted to, before
Sure.
we let you go, talk about the last bit of that book, where we're hearing so much talk about equality,
Mhm. Yeah.
At the end, we saw them also talking about equality, where they're wanting to raise the playing field to a level in Les Mis. However, Jean Valjean is not interested in that. He's interested in mercy. That's I wanted to contrast equality and mercy a little bit here at the end of this podcast, because we hear so much about equality, and there's so little understanding about what that means, especially how brutal it can be, how just cold and calculated that is, a push for equality.
Yeah.
What did you see out of Jean Valjean there at the end? What was his understanding of mercy, as opposed to what he was seeing with the revolt?
Yeah, I mean, his understanding of mercy is like, it's crazy when you think about the thing. I'm getting the chills right now as we're talking about this, like thinking about his character, because he was someone who basically tried to give everyone that he came across, by the end of the book, maybe not at the beginning of the book, but by the end, he had taken a lot of qualities that the bishop had in the beginning of the book, in that, he basically was constantly saving other people, and not just in, like, he actually would save them, like in conflicts, right? But then he would also like save their reputations. Like, he was constantly not telling other people about his reputation. Like, he was just always put other people before himself, even the people that hated him most. It goes in, you don't get this in the movie nearly as much, but when you look at the book, Marius, who is in love with Cosette, who is Jean Valjean, is like, that's like his little girl. Like, he raised her, he did everything he could, which was an act of mercy in itself on this mother who was a prostitute, who he found out was like, she couldn't make her wages. She ended up dying. He felt this responsibility to like take care of this little girl out of the goodness of his heart. Then, after raising her and getting very attached and wanting the best for her, seeing this guy come in and fall in love with her, knowing that if she stayed with him, it's going to be her downfall, because technically he's still a criminal at that point, right? So he slowly, takes himself out of the picture. And the whole time, Marius can't stand him. Ever since, Jean Valjean, they have this private conversation, which I won't give it away, all the stuff that goes on there, but basically, Marius, for the last, many chapters of the book, really hates, you can see in his actions that he hates Jean Valjean more and more and more and more and more, until he finds out that Jean Valjean was the one who saved him. And at that point, he's about to pass away. But with Marius, and then you talk about also Thénardier, who was constantly trying to steal his money. He just like rode off as like, whatever.
The arch thief.
Yeah. So if you look at, and then Javert, you have many antagonists in this book. Like, there's not one antagonist. The one antagonist is Jean Valjean fighting his own battle with his own, having this conscience, like these moral dilemmas that he's sifting through.
That's the point. That's exactly the point right there. So Javert is he's not, people point to him as the main antagonist. He's not. He's not the main antagonist in any way. And in fact, he actually is able, he is more, people think of him as the voice of justice, like, and the way that Jean Valjean overcomes justice is through mercy. He's not some sort of Robin Hood that's out beating the law. He's actually embracing the law and saying, look, no, there is a higher law than just the law of man. He embodies God's law in the end by the fact that Javert is on trial. He gets captured by the revolutionists, and he's on trial to be killed. And Jean Valjean actually steps in and rescues him. This man that has ruined his life at every turn. You know, like at any chance of happiness has constantly been thwarted by Javert. And Jean Valjean saves his life, gives him back his job, his career, everything, and says, "Look, you can arrest me now if you want." And that destroys Javert, because he cannot understand that level of self-giving, you know? And that also undermines the revolutionists who are out for equality. Okay, Javert did deserve death. All the terrible evil that he had done in the name of justice, he did deserve it. So if you're just going out with an eye for equality, you're going to be killing a lot of people like that. You're ruining a lot. But equality is not the goal. No. And Jean Valjean shows through his mercy what the goal is. And then, but at the end, like, see, that's not the end of the book. That's close to the end of the book. The end of the book, it's actually showing him self-mercy that allowed, like, that idea of, no, I am good. All the bad that I've done, all the good that I've done, we're not a sum of our actions. We are inherently good. And at the moment of death, that acceptance of his own incredible self-worth is really what takes him out of the terrible straits that he's in. And then you see that mercy breaking through he showed mercy to so many people, and because of that, he has shown mercy at the end. Like Hugo does such a good job of showing how the arch thief Thénardier is actually the salvation. That floored me. It's an incredible expose showing that equality is not the answer. It's a perfect message for our time.
Yeah, and that's something people don't want to hear. Like, they have a weird conception that if two things are different, then one is inherently better than the other. And it's like, nah, man, that's not how it works. Like, they're just, equal, we're equal in dignity, right? And your actual human value, and then not equal in almost every other regard for everything that you can name. You're talking race, sex, gender, all these different things. It's like, so it's actually kind of funny to me that, like, people put so much emphasis on the, like, race or sex, and it's like, why are we making those qualities a big deal? Why not height, right? Why not I don't know, why not, like, hair color, things like that? Like, why not, like, the ability, like, how far you can see without glasses, right? Why are we not basing all the, like, we seem to have chosen a few areas where, like, well, inequality in these areas is really important. Like,
why? That's an interesting question.
If two different things are different, like, you got to understand, like, that means, like, that's great. Like, if you went to a garden, would you want to go to a garden with a lot of different flowers and different types of fruit trees and all sorts of different roses? Or do you want to go to one with just, like, the same thing throughout the whole thing? And it's like, I mean, differences exist because they're beautiful. So I don't know, like, to make things equal is, like, I don't know, in my mind, like, as long as you can't sacrifice people's dignity, but you get that in place. Everyone has human value. Beyond that, like, you got to appreciate each other's differences, So anyway. I could rant about that for a while.
Yeah, no, well, this is great. I think it's a good place to stop. I know that we both got to bounce here, but I did want to say thank you for joining. It's always a good time chatting with you, Jess.
Yeah, man. Let me know when you want to have me on here again.
I'd love that. Yeah, we'll set it up and we can do a deep dive on some of these topics. But good. I hope everyone enjoyed talking about the modern American Revolution and what we can learn from Les Misérables. Jess, thanks again.
Appreciate it, man.
Catch you all next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. The Pinedo Brothers are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.